2. The Copper-Brown Face. Lansbury Hall had always had a very funny reputation. The old estate had been taken over some 250 years before by the Lansbury family, outsiders who were looked upon by the local people as foreigners, or emmets, as the Cornish call them. As such, they were not welcome. The Lansburys had become especially unwelcome when the locals had discovered that they were the kind of snobbish foreigners who would demolish the original house, an interesting and very ancient, but certainly very old-fashioned manor house, and would build up in its place something very smart and modern. Modern that was, for that time, long ago. Then, as if to add insult to injury, the newcomers had even rejected the proper Cornish name for the place. They had started calling it by the highfalutin name of Lansbury Hall. "Lansbury Hall? 'Tisn't proper," it was said. "Who do they think they be?" In truth, the new house was not quite as grand as the Lansbury family would have liked to believe. As if to compensate for this, they had commissioned from a local blacksmith a set of the most magnificent gates to stand at the entrance to the drive, a copy of some very elegant gates from somewhere up-country, gates that would show the locals just how special the Lansburys were. "The trouble is," the locals said, "they've got more money than sense." Yet, over the years, the local people had got used to the Lansbury family. They had come to accept them in a cautious kind of way. One of the Lansburys had even married a local Cornish girl, and that had helped a lot. Nevertheless, there were some strange stories about the Hall, some of them very strange indeed. Fernley didn't know which to believe. There was only one certainty. Lansbury Hall was now the home of the last surviving Lansbury, an old man called Theodore. Fernley himself was, as they say, no spring chicken. The year was 1985. He had stayed on at his job for as long as he could, and was due for retirement the following year. But Mr. Theodore had lived on his own, in total isolation and seclusion at Lansbury Hall, since even before Fernley had been born. He must, by now, be a very old man. Nobody knew how he managed, but manage he obviously did, for there was one place on Fernley's delivery route where he could just see the chimney-tops of the hall. Only yesterday he had seen smoke rising up from one of them. "So, the old fellow must still be alive and kicking," he told his wife that evening. "He'll be getting on toward 100 years old. He must be a very tough old bird." No one ever went into Lansbury Hall, and no one ever came out. Fernley could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times over the years that letters had arrived for Theodore Lansbury. When letters had arrived, he hadn't known what to do with them, for there was no way of getting in. The great gates to the hall were always kept locked. All he could do was to slip the letters nervously through the bars of the gate onto the ground inside, and hope that someone would pick them up. In the village there were rumors, whispered stories of strange noises echoing out from the old estate through the woodland and across the moors. When Fernley was a boy, his parents had told him many times not to go anywhere near the place. Even in daylight it was unwise, his father had said. But of course he took no notice. Old people like his parents always had such stuffy ideas. Looking back now, still with discomfort, he remembered his foolishness, how unwise he had been in not heeding all the warnings. It had taken a strange experience to teach him respect for his father's advice. It had all happened when he was 10 years old. He had been given a splendid new bicycle for his birthday. Not a brand-new bicycle, of course, for times were very hard in those days, and such things as brand-new bikes were quite beyond the reach of his family. But it was a new bike to him, a hand-me-down from an older cousin. Lovingly checked over by his father and freshly painted bright green in the secrecy of a neighbor's garden shed, the bike was produced as a shining surprise for Fernley's 10th birthday. It became his pride and joy. During the summer holiday that year, he went off on many wonderful long rides, first pushing biscuits into his pocket, then waving happily to his mother, setting off across the moor, stopping from time to munch biscuits and to enjoy the countryside. Sometimes his bicycle rides just happened to take him past the walls of the Lansbury Hall estate. Although he had been warned time and again to keep away from the place, he simply couldn't resist it. He had discovered a number of places where he could heave himself up a steep, stony bank and peer down into the grounds below. Mostly there wasn't much to see, which was very disappointing. Only thick, overgrown woodland stretching away into the distance. But in one of the places he had discovered a most enticing old orchard with some very fine greengage trees. On one particular late summer's day, a day that he would never forget, Fernley was out enjoying a ride on his bike. It was hot and sunny up on the moor. The farther he went, the hotter he became. The hotter and drier he became, the more he thought about juicy fruits, big, fat, juicy greengages hanging on trees in the wonderful orchard. Quite soon, as if by sheer coincidence, he found himself cycling in that direction. Getting over the wall had been simple, and sitting up in the branches was great, cool and comfortable and shady. The greengages were just at their best. He was sitting there, feasting on the fruit, noisily munching the juicy flesh and spitting out the stones with pleasure, when something made him stop and listen. He raised his head and looked out, up, across, and into the next tree. What he saw there gave him such a start. A face stared out from the leafy shadows, a very strange, copper-brown face. Fernley let out a gasp of dismay. He didn't stop to look again. Spluttering and almost choking, he slithered in panic down the tree, scraping his hands and legs as he went. Landing shaken at the bottom, he made a frantic dash for the bank, heaved himself over and grabbed his bike. Then, wavering from side to side, he cycled desperately back to the village as fast as his jellied legs would take him. 3. The Mysterious Letter. Fernley was a very sorry sight by the time he finally got back home. His hands and legs had bled quite badly. He was burning hot and wet all over, with squashed fruit mess all down his shirt. His face was a very bright, shiny red. After rushing indoors, he was promptly sick in the bathroom basin, to the great distress of his mother, but to the considerable delight of his small sister Loveday. She always enjoyed an exciting happening, especially if it was to Fernley's disadvantage. At tea-time, he had been pleased to see her sitting uncomfortably at the table, with such big, round, frightened eyes, whilst he told his colourful story, the story of the strange, brown face. He made it all as vivid as possible. Fernley wasn't quite sure whether his parents believed the story or not. They glanced uncomfortably at each other. Then they tried to play it all down. "Probably heat stroke and too many greengages," his mother said with a forced little smile. "You forget all about it, my beauty." His father only gave him a warning glare, a sort of "I told you so" kind of glare, and he went on tucking into his pot pie. Later Fernley realized that they had not been very impressed by his story. Perhaps they thought he'd made it all up. The next day he was so disappointed when he heard his mother talking in the garden. She was telling the story over the fence to their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Pascoe, but she was emphasizing all the wrong bits. "Yes, sick as a gannet he were," he heard his mother say. "It serves him right. He were sick as a gannet." He had hoped that the story of his exciting adventure, for now that he was fully recovered, that was the way that he liked to think of it, would have impressed Mrs. Pascoe's son, Walter, who was the same age as himself, and something of a rival at school. But Walter and his skinny, sticky-faced little sister, Morwena, had stood there in the garden laughing. And so the incident had ended. Later on, looking back, Fernley couldn't help wondering why he had panicked and been so frightened, for he had to admit, if only to himself, that he had been badly frightened. "I suppose it was guilt," he had said to himself, "being somewhere where you shouldn't be. Trespassing and stealing fruit, P.C. Pengelly would probably call it. Fernley might even be labelled a thief." P.C. Pengelly was the local police officer, a seemingly enormous man with extremely large boots. He cycled round his beat each day, and in some mysterious way always knew or managed